The name says it all. Afro, savvy, mind. To know my guest today is to know why all three of those words perfectly fit not only her personality, but obviously her profile. So, I don't know if you, TS Strong community, are tuning in for the very first time. If so, welcome. On the other hand, you might be coming back for another episode of Controversy Podcast, and I want to say welcome back and thank you so much for taking the opportunity to come and hear. And boy, do I have a great conversation for you. Our featured guest today is none other than my sister, my friend, Amber Bolden. I am Brandon T. Bailey, and this is Controversy. As an educator, professional counselor, and owner of Bolden Consulting, Amber Marie Bolden is mission-driven when it comes to helping others vitalize their mental health and wellness. Whether supporting families or training organizations, she brings her brand of compassion, zeal, and humor to the work of transformation. I won't tell you today the story of how we met, but I will tell you this, you are in for a treat because this sister put it down. So ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome none other than my sister and my friend, Amber Bolden. Amber, I am grateful you took the time to come and talk to the TS Strong community. I want to start the interview with a mindset check. In my network marketing days, I was taught to surround yourself with the thinking that outthinks you. So I want to expose our listeners to the way you think. All right, these are a few warm-up questions. You ready?
Okay, I'm ready.
I'm so excited to talk to my sister, y'all. First of all, Amber, what motivates you?
Freedom.
Yeah.
Freedom. Making people
Why don't you say
smile.
it faster next time?
Freedom. Making people smile. And, really helping people get to the core of their potential so they can have a thriving life. Like that. Yeah. That's my thing. Yeah.
I love it. Do you have fears? And if you do, how do you manage them?
So in terms of a significant fear, one of them that I have is about my aging parents and long-term care for them. They're fine now, but, I'm always thinking ahead. And so I just want to make sure that resources are there. Plans are, continually being made, just to make sure that they're taken care of in the way that they want to be. To be clear, I don't want my parents in any kind of home.
Okay.
And that's significant and that's expensive. And I want to be able to make sure that they can live out their days as they desire.
Yeah. And right now it's not even safe. I mean, it's like
not safe.
It's crazy.
It's not safe.
Keeping you lifted in that. Mindfulness, this is a buzzword these days. So what does it mean to you and how do you use it if at all?
So, in the simple definition of being aware, I am mindful, right? But as a movement, this whole capitalist movement that has gone afoot with it, I'm not a part of it. So I don't necessarily challenge myself to have mindfulness practice. I just choose, language is really important to me. Yeah. And so I'm always aware, but, from a spiritual perspective, I'm more discerning. about things and, intentional.
Yeah.
So that's really where I fall with
I
that.
like those buzzwords. I know when I teach it to my band students, which, is kind of crazy, but it's an awareness, right? As a musician, you have to
Yes.
be aware of different things that you would normally ignore. And that's what
Right.
when I got into my mindfulness practice, that's kind of what I took from it. And I agree with you. I mean, the commercial part of it is a little crazy, but there's so much depth in the practice of just becoming aware of things you would otherwise ignore. So,
Hmm.
loving it. Amber, tell me a story about failure and how you overcame it.
Sure. So I want to share this story because it just came up like 10 days ago.
Mm.
Okay. So I wrote a tribute to my eighth grade teacher, thanking her for how she shifted me at a really critical time. So when I was in seventh grade, I had this amazing teacher, Mr. White. She's from Alabama, moving up to the north. He was actually also the first black male teacher I ever had. And so he was serious about education because he had come through some things, right,
Mm-hmm.
in his life. But for whatever reason, I was really bored in school that year. I didn't feel challenged at all. I didn't do my work. Got in
I
trouble
don't
a
know any
lot.
of those people.
I would get a detention. This one time I got a detention, tore it up, gave it back to him. And he said, you know what? I need to see your father. I
Oh.
need to see your father. He didn't want to talk to my mother. He was like, your father needs to come before you can come back in my class.
Ooh.
So I go home, tell my dad, blah, 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 right? So that year, I would ace all the tests. And for the most part, I was respectful, for the most part. But what ended up happening was as a result of my poor academic performance, I got passed over for this advanced academic program for eighth grade. Right?
Message.
And it hurt me to my bone.
Yes.
So my mother
Yes.
had been telling me, she was like, Amber, you need to change your attitude, but there's nothing like a lesson to show you, right? So my friends all went to the academically talented program, and I was in regular section of eighth grade, right? So this teacher, Mrs. Dean, she saw how bummed I was, discouraged I was, just really kind of disconnected. And she really poured into me. She got me re-engaged in school. She gave me all of this leadership responsibility. She invited me into her home, and that's pretty rare.
Yes.
But that's what community is too,
Yes.
right? And so her daughters were very accepting of me. I mean, she had me over for dinner. Like, it was all of this stuff, and it completely changed me. And so here's what I learned about failure. What I learned is that it really is an event. It isn't a person. Like, I learned that I wasn't a failure. I failed at something. Right? I failed at connecting. I failed at academically performing. But I wasn't a failure as a person. And she helped me acknowledge that. And so I just wrote a tribute to her. That was over 35 years ago. And I love her still. And so I wrote her a letter and just letting her know that I appreciated how she changed my life.
That's big. I mean, I think adults struggle even with learning that lesson, right? I messed up. That doesn't mean, just because I failed at something doesn't mean I am a failure. And
Right.
I think a couple of episodes I've been doing, people have been talking about internalizing the failures is how that depression sets in. It's how those,
Yes.
those dark thoughts really just kind of capture your mind. So that is an amazing lesson about failure. All of
Yeah.
the TS Strong community know you may fail, doesn't make you a failure. Thank you so much, Amber.
Yes.
Well, I hope our listeners have a better idea about how you think at this point. I think it's already starting to shine through. But I want to warm up to some of the controversial stuff now.
Sure. Let's
This
go.
next segment is about faith. And I know Amber, y'all, so this is going to be good. But I talk a lot about my journey and the controversy it's caused, right? Starting to lose the faith and all of those things, getting back into it. So I want our TS Strong community to kind of get your perspective. Let's get into that a bit. You ready?
I'm ready. Let's go.
All right, Amber. So what is your spiritual background, and how's your faith impacted who you are today?
Sure. So I was raised Christian.
Yes,
Surprise.
sir.
I was raised Christian, been in church my entire life.
Come on.
Leadership is church is where I got my leadership. Actually, outside of my home, the next place was church, right?
Yep.
But as I, moved into my teenage years, that's when, things started waning a bit. Do I have to go this Sunday? Do I got to go Wednesday? Is Friday required? Right? And so, my mother was like, yes, and yes. Right?
Come on.
And
Get in the car.
when I got to college, that's when it really became, let me try to check out some other stuff, right? And by other stuff, I don't mean other religions necessarily, but definitely just exploring more on my own, right?
Okay.
And so when I was about 23, that's really when I came into relationship, like understanding that my mother's faith isn't my faith, excuse me, that I've got to live this thing out for myself. And so it was at 23. It wasn't smooth by any means. In one of the denominations in which, I served, I was actually on track to become a minister.
Come on.
And,
Come on.
all of that, we had to make a shift though. But I still have been a teacher in the church and, Bible study leader, that kind of thing. And so because I've had such an interesting circuitous route in terms of finding my own relationship piece, when we talk about faith and feelings, I hope this isn't too early, but professionally, as a counselor and a mental health, just advocate, it has really burned me up in terms of how people are pushed into a corner to decide faith or feelings instead of faith and feelings.
Yes.
And so I've generally been pretty outspoken, and there's a lot of patriarchy that happens in the church, and we won't go down that road. But
it's controversy now.
It is. But me being an advocate for mental health and being outspoken in the church and being a woman has been rather difficult at times. And so I'll simply say that the role that my faith has played, it's grounding, right? But it also has shifted as I've encountered various life experiences.
Yeah.
So I've never left it, but it definitely has taken different shape at various points throughout my life.
So that's a great transition to the next question, because we definitely gonna get into that faith and feelings part a little bit more in the third segment. But I never left it, right? So let's talk about that. Was there ever a time where you started to lose your faith, right? Because I think what I find interesting as I've been kind of working through this is people stepping away from the church is different than kind of losing faith, right? And for me, stepping away from the church was easy. Losing my faith was like, what? What just happened? So was there a time where that started to happen to you?
So, yeah, I would say late 20s, early 30s, I was just in some bad relationships. And I was also experiencing some deep hypocrisy in the church.
Amen.
With other people, right? With leaders.
Yeah.
And so I was just like, this can't be it. Like, there's got to be more to it than this. I'll also insert this. When I think about our racial and ethnic journey in the United States, that has also been a huge piece of me looking at my face saying, okay, God, I trust you, but the way some of this is playing out is problematic for me.
Yes.
In so many ways.
Yes.
And so, I have stepped away from the church in my life, but I haven't left my faith. But I've come close to just being like, okay, God, I'm exhausted. And I have exhausted, right? Just this place of patience, and it'll be revealed, and stand strong, and it's going to be all right. Like it started sounding very surface to me. Like one thing I'm not is a cliche person. Like I don't really like cliches. And I feel like cliches in the church are huge, especially from a cultural perspective.
They are.
And I just wasn't with that. Like
Yes.
I wasn't about this line. I was about that line, right? Not the vertical, but the horizontal.
Yeah.
And there was a time in my life where I just felt like it wasn't happening. And so, thankfully, I just was able to get quiet and get still and do some work on my own. And when I say on my own, not by myself, but finding the resources that I needed. And so that helped me stay attached. But yeah, I've been totally stretched.
That's good. I mean, I talk a lot throughout the podcast, especially a lot of my topical episodes, about how the scriptures that kept me, when people would use them in a cliche way, like it would get under my skin to the point where I was like, I don't want to hear joy comes in the morning no more. Like, don't even say that to me.
Because it sounds dismissive.
Yes.
That's the thing. It sounds dismissive. And sometimes what I've learned, especially when people are going through things, I've learned why, for real, that we have two ears and one mouth. Like sometimes it's really, we just got to listen.
Yes.
We really do need to listen. And, listen for God to give you a word, and maybe that word is for you to just listen.
Yes.
Right? It isn't for you to rebut all the time.
Yeah.
And
it's
advise all
maxed
the
in
time.
encouragement. Like, I think it comes from a good intentional place, but it can be damaging. It can be counterproductive. Like, it's just... I hope that's one of the things that comes from, this is controversial stuff for church folk who just believe that I'm speaking the word and I'm like, look, okay, but there's a time and place where that is just not helpful.
Yeah. Like, for example, and I'm sure you can appreciate this. When people pass away, to the loved ones, there's most things I'm just not saying. I just want them to know that I'm there for them and I'll check in on them. I don't go trying to tell them anything because I'm not in their shoes, for one. And it's deeper than we'll ever know, right? The loss. And so it isn't for me to try to quote all of this stuff to give you. It's for me to communicate that I'm here when and if you need anything.
Yes. Amen to that. So before I get too far away from this, let me bring it back to this question, because this is a good one, especially for you. The Bible specifically talks about prayer and meditation. And I believe that the modern church doesn't do a great job of distinguishing them. And I really believe it's because most people don't understand the difference. So how do you compare and contrast these two very, very valuable but very different practices?
Woo! You know what?
Let's go.
I apologize in advance for people who get offended.
Hey, look, they better not listen to my show, because listen. I named it this for a reason. Like, let's do it.
Okay. Here's the thing. What I believe and what I see is that there's so much focus on prayer and telling God what you want and adoring him, but really the prayer. I mean, we got the tone. We got the volume.
Yes, sir.
We got the type.
Yes, sir.
We got the place. Right? We got the day of the week. We got all that.
We got the amount of time. Pray for an hour.
We got the amount of time. You know, we got the 12-hour prayer countdown.
Come on.
But here's the thing. When are you going to hear from him? That's what meditation is. Meditation is being able to hear what he's saying. And so what I have learned in my life, and I'm still working on this, right?
Yeah.
In general, I've learned to meditate more for various reasons, right? Just like in the middle of the day. But when it comes to the prayer and meditation part, what's he telling you? So are you in the Bible? Like, there's nothing that says you can't pray and then open your Bible. There's nothing that says that your prayer time can be 15 minutes and you spend 45 in that meditation. What have you? I'm just giving that time frame as an example. But it's just like you and I having a conversation. if I go to you, Brandon, with all of my cares, right?
Come
and
on,
then
cast
I
your
just
cares on him.
abruptly, right? And then I just abruptly leave the conversation, but I don't hear how it is that you can help me. I don't hear how you want to direct me. I don't hear how you're keeping me. I don't hear how you're sustaining me. Then I miss the benefits of who you are and what you have to offer. And so the meditation piece, because so many people don't research stuff on their own,
right?
To know that meditation isn't restricted to Eastern religions, right? Meditation is an action, period. It's an action. So to know that you're not going against God by meditating, you need to be able to get quiet and get still and be able to hear from him. And so, so many times we're just so focused on the output that we're not focused on the input. And the input is really the direction.
Yeah. Growing up in church, I totally learned that talk, pray, that philosophy. And yes, they tell you to get into your word, but I just don't believe people teach about what meditation is, which is why so many Christian folk are confused. So they only see it as, this Buddhist practice. They only see it as this kind of weird thing where, you know what I mean? Like, but that stillness, when God said, be still and know that I am God. What is that? That is the practice of meditation, calming yourself down and just hearing from him.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because there's so much noise.
Yes.
There's so much noise.
Especially in the traumatic mind. Oh, God.
Absolutely. That's part of how you stay traumatized, right? You have the program running. You're nothing. You'll never be anything. You're not good enough. You'll never make it. Kill yourself. Do it. All of that. That program is constantly running. So it is critical to get still.
Yeah. Whoo. Y'all, she preaching. Listen, but you know what else I love about this, Amber? You do not have to have a title, pastor, preacher, reverend, in order to minister. When I saw this work as ministry is when God gave me the freedom to just put it out. You know what I mean? Where it wasn't about the output so much anymore. It was just understanding that somebody else can benefit from something you went through. We talk about test and testimony, but I don't know if we really understand what it means to...
Let me say, I just told somebody maybe 3 weeks ago, I said, you know what? And I'm not going to name any churches on the podcast, but let me say this. There is such power in being able to regularly have people testify. It doesn't even have to look like the old school testimony service. I'm just saying, especially from a cultural perspective, where in our churches particularly, there's so much shame around a lot of stuff that has happened and conditioning around what happens here stays here. This is how people get entrenched and they get stuck in anxiety and depression because they've been trained not to tell anybody. But let me just say this. When I can see someone else and how God took their mess, cleaned it up, equipped them to go on out and help other people, that is powerful beyond, it's powerful, right? And I don't think people see enough of it. And so that's something I think, especially in 2021, from a visual perspective, having members of the church just share a video about what God has done, how we did it, and what the progress is now. The goal of the testimony is not to express perfection. It's to express progress. And his work in your life, right? Progress over perfection. We totally need to see more of that.
Absolutely. Ooh, folks, Amber has already shared some great insights, okay? But I do want to switch gears just a little bit. Amber, we have talked about faith, but now I want to talk about feelings. And you started kind of making some of this transition already. This is often much harder to talk about. So this is where my deep understanding of Brene Brown's teaching on vulnerability really
Mm-hmm.
comes in handy. I know I wasn't a vulnerable person. I'm learning to be that for the sake of my own healing.
Mm-hmm.
So this can get messy, but I think it's going to be beneficial to our listeners. So Amber, you ready to switch gears and talk about
I'm ready.
feelings?
Let's go. Let's do it.
What does mental health mean to you, and why should a larger number of people care about it?
Sure. So I'm saying this from a professional perspective,
Yes, sir.
especially, right? So it literally is your cognitive, your behavioral, your emotional well-being. In other words, it's how you think, behave, and feel.
Okay.
It's your life. It's a big rock in your life. And so everybody should care about it because it directly impacts how you function.
Yep. Yep. Yes, absolutely. And I think one of the things I started to struggle with as I was putting this together is the myths, the way people think about what it is and what it's not. Like everybody associated with crazy, and I mean just all of these things, especially in church. And
Yes.
then we miss opportunities to really help people heal and grow, which is the work of the church in the first place.
Right.
So yeah, absolutely. Most folks never really talk about it, Amber, but I believe that we are all 1, maybe 2 degrees of separation from someone with a serious mental health complication, right? It is way closer than most people think. Have you or somebody you know, obviously mental health professionals, so probably had an issue with mental health, and how did it get resolved?
Sure. So, just from a general perspective, I would like to offer this. So, I work with teenagers a lot, and anxiety is really high. In the last 10 years, teenagers are more anxious than they've ever been. And they're actually more clinically anxious now as well. And so when I think about anxiety or depression, for example, the one thing I want to say, and this has probably been shared on your other episodes, but having mental illness is no different than having medical illness, right?
Preach.
If something is wrong with your breathing, you go to the hospital. If something's wrong with your heart, you go to the hospital. When something is going on with your thinking, right, you go and get help. And so at the end of the day, I want people to know that anxiety can range from like this mild experience to a disorder. And so you don't want to play around with it, depending upon, where you intersect with it, what's going on in your life at the time, can take you through the range of the diagnosis. And so I know that a lot of people that I work with, whether I have to refer out for medication or they simply continue with talk therapy or play therapy or art therapy, even, for example, those are just some of the ways that it gets resolved. So there's a range in terms of how it gets handled.
Yeah. So let me ask you this, because I was part of kind of how all of this came together. I went to a PD and got exposed to some statistics. So I work in elementary. I know you work with high school kids. That's where I started. But what kind of blew my head was a statistic that said that like 50% of serious mental health issues are established in that, like, I think it was 6 to 14.
Yes.
And I was like, these are the kids in front of me. So by the time they get to high school, they've already developed these poor thinking habits. And like, how do we as educators look at our responsibility differently now? Because the reality of trauma in front of us, ain't no getting rid of that. I mean, we coming out of a pandemic. Like, these kids are going to need some work.
Yes.
I got my dissertation on trauma-informed music education because, listen, we gonna need trauma-informed everything in the next few years. But so what advice could you give to educators to better care about the mental health, even though they're not mental health professionals?
So the first thing is really looking at the whole child. And I know that that's often said to be a part of the practice, but I can tell you from a professional perspective, it doesn't happen.
Amen.
The focus is on the academic, the curricula. That's where the focus is. And so being able to really look at each child as a human being, and to recognize that they've got a range of needs. And so if you can tap into them emotionally, finding something that they love to do, right? Like finding a hobby, something that they find fun, something that you can relate to them on outside of the academic piece, is a great reminder to them that you are present with them, especially when they're younger. It's a great reminder that that you're present with them. And then it allows you to remember, I know what the school may say about what you have to teach, but if the student is shut down mentally, you're not teaching anything.
Yeah.
So do you want to relate to them and figure out how you can reach them, or do you want to keep pushing the academic piece and deal with a completely different set of issues? Yeah, we got to see the whole child.
Yeah. It's in a lot of mission statements, but I agree with you. I don't think we're really doing it.
No.
Mindfulness and therapy have taught me to be an observer of my feelings, and not just a slave to them. But this ain't always easy. You know what I mean? I know that I personally have not always done it well, but what is your experience with identifying negative feelings and emotions? Have you grappled with or overcome them in the past? And what advice do you give to people who are struggling with, processing these negative emotions and turning it around?
So earlier this week, I texted my brother and my sister the crying emoji. And I said, today I feel like I'm fighting gravity. Like, that's just how stressful things have been, right, in the pandemic. And so I was like, wow, what is this heaviness? I cannot shake it today. Like, what is going on? And so I go back to this. I have a routine in the morning. And eventually throughout the day, I was able to, to move out of the space. But here's what I had to do. I had to kind of repeat my routine a few different times throughout the day. So for me in the morning, it's the acknowledgement of who God is in my life before I do anything, right? It's my prayer time. It's my affirmations. It's what I listen to, right? It's who I talk to. It's what I'm eating, right? All of that affects the gravity, right? And so for me, I'm really mindful of how my day gets started. Like, that first 20 minutes is critical. I don't watch the news. I don't check email. I don't go on social media. I don't do any of that. All of that is just grounding time. That's what that is. And so I would say this. I think so I was able to shift from it. But I think what happens is when people are struggling with these feelings, depending upon what's going on in their lives, just having a routine doesn't always move them out of the space. But I can tell you, if you do it regularly from a preventative standpoint, it helps you over time, right? Like, your habits matter. And so I would say to any person out there, if you don't have a healthy routine, get a healthy routine going in the morning. You don't need to be on IG at 6 a.m. You don't need that. And you might say, well, but there's something, inspirational. No, you know what? The electronics, you don't really need to do all that so super early in the morning. Just be with yourself, be with him, tap into what the intention is for the day, like what's set for the day, and making sure that mentally you're kind of tilling your soil, right? To make sure that you can receive what it is that's necessary for the day.
I love it. That's good advice. That's good advice, y'all. All right. Amber, the TS Strong community is definitely warmed up. Man, it's been some good content in here. But let's get to the controversy. All right. When I
Okay.
first conceptualized this podcast, it was specifically about mental health. But talking about it, developing it, it really became a deeper conversation about what faith was and what feeling was and what the tension between those two were specifically in the church, right? So this is the controversy I want to shine a spotlight on because I think this is the help that people really need. So are you still willing to get to this
Yes.
controversy?
Let's go.
Let's get it. Prior to COVID-19, the church was not talking about issues of mental health. I'm so glad that is changing, but my God in heaven, okay? What is or what should be the relationship between faith and feelings?
Woo!
Come on.
And I'm gonna build in some extra time just so we can cover this controversy. So we got a little more time.
Come on.
Here's the thing. The reality from where I stand, especially from a professional perspective, is that they should be one. There shouldn't be this either you believe God or you don't. Like that's what happens when we're experiencing, right, these different assaults on us mentally.
Yes.
The church tells you, oh, well, if you're trying to go see a professional, then you're not believing God for your healing. Let me just say this. Is that the same response you give to somebody that needs the transplant or that needs the heart surgery? Amen. Are you saying you don't believe God because you're going to the hospital?
Amen.
But we don't see the same value.
Amen.
In the mind. And I dare say it's just as valuable, especially as is the emotional center. Right. And so I think that, and this might be jumping ahead, but I think that ministry leaders need to dial in more deeply and really start addressing this even from a language perspective, because, you know, one of the fine lines that we have to walk within the church is, well, speak those things, right? Or don't speak it.
Yes.
And so people,
and that's hard.
It is hard because people have a hard time acknowledging what they actually feel without wanting to position themselves as seeming without faith.
Yes.
Right. And so, you know, I do believe you have to be able to name it if you're going to address it. Now, I don't think that you should walk around life in perpetuity saying, I'm depressed. I don't believe that either. I believe that you can take more of an affirmative approach and say, you know what, I'm getting better every day. That doesn't negate that you're feeling a certain way today, but you want to still speak life. Right. Without ignoring that there's something that needs to be addressed. And so I think there shouldn't be a distinction.
I love that. Because for me, that's where the problem was. I had all of this philosophy built up that was fighting against my acknowledgement of the feelings and the thoughts that were in my head. So then you just trying to ignore it, believing that God will take it away. Well, you're not addressing the problem. And you would not do that with a physical ailment.
No.
And that's why I was like, we gotta look at this different. And like I said, look, I'm glad there are ministers, there are people who are changing the conversation because we ain't really got no choice. You know, This pandemic is tearing people up.
Yep.
But we have abdicated our responsibility.
Absolutely.
And we need to go back and get folks that have been hurt by that. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Yeah. Now, so let me ask you this. You are a mental health professional. So do you think it's harder to address, to capture people that have been indoctrinated with that pray about it philosophy? Is it more difficult to get them?
Yes.
Why not?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes. And yes. Let me just say that in case you didn't hear me. Yes.
Why?
Part of the reason why is because, you know, depending upon how people were raised in the culture religiously, people hold to it like gold. Like, they've been taught not to
Yes.
question. And if that's their position, there's a concrete thinking that activates. And so trying to rip a brick out of that hand is like, look, it's a real thing. And so I also, again, when you look at this historically, depending upon how you grew up in the church, you know, a lot of people learned from an oral tradition, not from learning on their own. And so, or studying for themselves. And so if that is the case, you don't feel confident in taking those paths to open yourself up more to relationship. Dare I say that a lot of people are still stuck in religion. Yep. That's another show, but it's the same principle, right? Yeah. It's the same principle. And I just think there's just a lot of, you know, cultural conditioning that has happened around this. And I find it much more difficult because people even marginalize and undervalue their own emotions because that's how they survive. And so they understand survival mode, right? And that's familiar. And trying to shift that to thriving mode.
It is. And it's hard
scary.
Work. I want to be real clear, folks. It's hard work.
It is work.
Yes. My goodness. It is. So there's a ministry for everything, right? In today's modern church. Mm-hmm. Should there be a mental health ministry? Like, I don't know what that would look like, but should there be something that the church does actively to address mental health needs in the body?
Sure. So I see it kind of from a two-tiered approach. Number one, I think just the same way that regular health and wellness should be a part, right? The mental wellness needs to come right on in. And so, like I just said earlier, the preventative stuff is a lot of what wellness is about. And so if there's a seminar, if there's a newsletter, whatever the tips and strategies are for helping to manage stress and, you know, helping people find the tools. Really, it's really like teaching people to fish, right? You don't want to give them the fish for everything, but you want to help them fish. And so I think that's part of our responsibility, right? The second tier of it is actually contracting or hiring a licensed clinical professional to be on your staff, or like I said, you either hire them or you contract with them so that your members have somebody that they can be referred to that has been vetted, that is competent, you know, that is well able, you know, to serve them and to help them with these issues. And to me, that is beyond, I mean, that is ministry, but that's not a lay person's ministry. That's a real professional skill that you have to have. And I'll even go so far as to say this, you know, pastoral counseling is different from clinical counseling. You know, pastors can, you know, there's some stuff that they can do and there's some stuff that they can't in the realm and should not, because it is,
come on, controversy.
It's irresponsible.
Yes.
It's irresponsible, right? But sometimes ego keeps people from acknowledging that. But we need to be able to, no more than I can perform a heart surgery. We need to go on and connect with that cardiologist.
That's good.
And quit playing. And so, I think there's a two-tiered approach to that.
I mean, we got to be careful. When we think about like the world of finances, it's really clear that you don't take financial advice from a broke person, right? That part's clear. Then why do you take mental health, you know, advice from someone who A, hasn't experienced it, or B, isn't trained to help you work through it?
I agree. I think people, if they've been through, like, there's stuff that you can share, right? And you're not a professional, but you have an experience and you're working through it. So there's, again, you can say some things, but depending upon where people are, they still need to seek that out for themselves. And when you need professional level care, you need to pursue it.
Amen. Amen to that. Now, okay, Amber, so specifically, when you think about the future of faith and feelings, now this is one of my favorite questions because it really is controversial. The church, is the church meeting the needs of when we think about the church meeting the needs of the people in regards to their mental health, is the church meeting the people where they are, or are we in a place where we're expecting people to just accept the church where it is? Like, well, this, this is where the body is, but like, where's the responsibility?
So I think there's a dual responsibility. The church has got to recognize that while foundationally there are some things that should remain, in terms of practice, there are some things that need to be evaluated and perhaps updated and improved, right? If I'm a member or a parishioner or a congregant, I'm also responsible for my life. So I can't be mad if the pastor doesn't have a clinical professional on staff, then I need to go and find somebody. Amen. So I'm going to perhaps make a recommendation to say, hey, you know what, as a member of the church, I know that other people could really benefit from this. Is there some thought around doing something in this area, right, to help our members? And depending upon what that answer is, you still need to go and find the help that you need for you. And so I'm hoping that people really take seriously the impact of the pandemic, that people are forever changed, that people have some trauma that they don't even know that they really have yet, that may not manifest until another time in their lives. Recognizing that triggers are real for people, and that this whole going back to what was pre-pandemic is dead. It's done. Let that go. It's done. And we need to actually, as leaders, I would encourage them to really sit down and think about how it is that they want to engage more thoughtfully with members, to make sure, that they're plugged in and connected and healthy in the ways that they should be.
Yeah, absolutely. Woo-wee. Y'all, this has been good. Amber, the controversial nature of this conversation means that it could go on forever. My guess is the TS Strong community will probably stop listening and find other things to do because, they have busy lives as well. So that being said, I want to transition to close the interview. I'm going to miss you, but we want to transition to close. So as we wrap this up, I want you to consider any parting words of wisdom, any advice, any resources that you might want to share with the TS Strong community as we come to the close. So first and foremost, Amber, what are your final words of guidance that current and future controversy fans, our trauma survivors, our trauma supporters need to hear? What do they need to hear from you?
Sure. I just want to first of all say that you were created for a purpose, and so you are valuable. As long as you are breathing, there is an opportunity to make a change. So give yourself the opportunity.
I love that. That connects so much. Find that project, find that thing that you are uniquely created to do, and invest your time into it. So that's totally connected to what we've been talking about. Are there any books or other resources relevant to the topic that we need to check out?
So one book by Dr. Miles Monroe is Understanding the Purpose and Power of Prayer, because he talks a lot about meditation.
Thank you!
Yeah, it really is. There's a significant portion about meditation.
That. Yes.
Absolutely. A second book that I would offer that centers culture and race is The Unapologetic Guide to Black Mental Health. And I offer that because there's just some things that we experience in our community a bit differently. And we need to give ourselves the permission to go ahead and get healthy and whole.
See, so that means when I get to season 2, when I'm ready to talk about that part of it, I need to, so Amber gonna have to come back Because I got a whole nother thing about how we don't talk about that and how that's destroying us specifically. Yeah, we'll double back on that one. Thank you so much. Are
Okay.
you working on
Absolutely.
anything that you want us to check out that we can support your mission, your message, or your work?
So I actually have a ton of things, but I'll simply say this. You can follow me on Instagram at Afro Savvy Mind. I have a few things that I'm doing. February will be a monumental month. And then on Facebook, you can follow me at I Am Bolden, Amber Marie Bolden on Facebook. And I have health and wellness tips for the
I love
community.
it. I gotta check the date. I think you might be in February anyway, but I'll email you and let you know. That would be very convenient.
Yes.
Oh my God, Amber, thank you so much for your perspective, for your thoughts, for your insight. I believe firmly that it's going to be very, very valuable to our TS Strong community. I appreciate you. I'm glad to see you again. I'm glad we were able to have this conversation, and I hope it's helpful.
This was so wonderful. Thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. All right, y'all. Peace. Trauma survivors, trauma supporters, to all of you, my TS Strong community, thank you so much for investing the time to watch or to listen to another episode of the Controversy Podcast. I, your host, Brandon T. Bailey, am so grateful for your time, your attention, your energy, and your effort to support this very, very, very important mission. Listen, as we endeavor to make our show better and continue to offer incredible resources to all of you, the TS Strong community, I do have an ask. I'm going to ask that you subscribe, rate, and review the show. Let us know what you think. Let us know what we could do better. Let us know what kind of resources we can continue to offer to all of you, the TS community, so that we can all together learn to live TS Strong. All right, finally, I want to personally invite you to the Controversy Project Facebook group, A Safe Place. It is a free and exclusive community where trauma survivors and trauma supporters have gathered together to share testimonies, to share resources, and to share support and love for each other, as all of us are endeavoring to learn to live TS Strong. This is just another one of the many multimedia platforms that we have chosen to use in order to fulfill this very, very important mission. And I want to invite you to be a part of it and obviously welcome you to it in advance. Listen, in closing, until next time, I want to remind each and every one of you how important it is for you to confront your pain, how important it is for you to live your purpose, and how important it is for you to invest in your project. Till next time, peace.